All right, let's get started then. Excellent. Welcome to the virtual colloquium series, In Conversation, Arts and Culture for Well-Being, organized by the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project at the University of Pennsylvania. My name is James Pawelski, and I'm Professor of Practice and Director of Education in the Positive Psychology Center at Penn, and the founding director of the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to those who are joining us live and to those who are watching the recorded version of today's event. The mission of the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project is to understand, assess, and advance the well-being benefits of engagement in arts and culture, focusing on individual and collective human flourishing. We're grateful for support from the Drew and H.J. Heinz II Charitable Trust and the National Endowment for the Arts, which has designated the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project as an NEA research lab and is supportive both of practice-informed research and of research-informed practice in the arts, culture, and well-being. You can find out much more about the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project, including our publications and how to sign up for our newsletter on our website at www.humanitiesandhumanflourishing.org. Check the chat for that link, which we will post, which we've just posted in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. Today, we are thrilled to continue with our colloquium series, which features presentations by and discussions between scientists and practitioners on topics concerning the arts, culture, and well-being. Before we turn to our distinguished speakers for today, let me preview the plan for this colloquium. We'll begin by hearing two 20-minute presentations. And today, we're really fortunate to be hearing from speakers who are both researchers and practitioners themselves. So after the presentations, I will moderate a brief discussion with the speakers before opening it up to a Q&A with all of you. At any point during the session, feel free to enter questions or comments in the chat. If you would like to share these verbally, please wait until we open it up for audience participation toward the end of our time together, and then I'll invite you to raise your Zoom hand. And with that, let's turn to our speakers. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Hod Orkibi. Hod is a certified psychodramatist, a tenured associate professor, and the founding director of the Drama and Health Science Lab at the University of Haifa, Israel. He chairs the doctoral program in the School of Creative Arts Therapies and holds an adjunct faculty position at the New York University Drama Therapy Program. His research areas include psychodrama and drama therapy process and outcomes, creative adaptability, well-being, positive psychology, and systematic reviews. He has secured competitive grant funds, authored over 85 publications, and presented at international conferences. He serves as an associate editor for the American Psychological Association journal, Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity in the Arts, and is a member of the editorial boards for the Arts in Psychotherapy, Drama Therapy Review, and the German GMS Journal of Arts Therapies. In Europe, he actively contributes to research to the research committee of the Federation of European Psychodrama Training Organizations. Hod, it is delightful to have you with us today. Can't wait to hear what you have to share with us. Welcome.
Thank you, James, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. I want to start my presentation that is will focus on positive psychology from surviving to thriving. And so you probably ask yourself, what is psychodrama? So let's start with a little bit understanding of what is psychodrama. Psychodrama is a creative experiential intervention method in which clients basically use guided role play by the therapist to work on real life personal and interpersonal challenges and possible solutions to those challenges. Another very essential component of psychodrama, and actually also drama therapy, is what we call the dramatic reality or the fantastic reality that is related to what Moreno called the surplus reality. and he viewed Moreno, J.L. Moreno, who is the founder of Psychodrama, he viewed the dramatic reality as an extension of the everyday reality, giving an externalized dramatic form to clients' inner intangible experiences. So this reality that is beyond everyday reality is a fail-safe reality of play and pretend, which enables clients to explore different ways of coping without really risking the consequences or a disaster as they might in life itself. For example, telling your boss what you really think about them, expressing something that you don't dare to express to your spouse or your partner, and other things that you might consider to try to rehearse towards real life. So I just want to give a little bit context. Psychodrama was invented in the last century, 1920s, by J.L. Moreno. And it really came as a reaction to the dominant psychotherapeutic, psychoanalytic approach that Sigmund Freud in Vienna represented. And it really symbolizes a shift from isolated individual therapy to group therapy, from passive talk therapy to action therapy, from sick patient to a protagonist, which is borrowed from the Greek theater, and protagonist means the hero or the leading actor. Pro is the first, agon is the one who goes through the struggle or goes through the journey of being the hero of his own or her own journey in life. And moving from a laid back in a sofa to the stage and being actively on the stage. And what you can see here on the screen is a model of this stage that is really now situated in upstate New York. And this is the original stage of Psychodrama, and they do training over there. So this is just another example of, this is J.L. Moreno. And I just wanted to show you here, he died in America in 1974, but on his tomb that is located in Vienna, there is something very interesting that symbolizes, I think, the essence of his thinking. And this is what they say, his student and his family member. J.L. Moreno believed first in life and then in pathology. He wished to be remembered as the person who brought joy to psychiatry. And this is actually written here on the lower part of his tomb. So what is positive psychodrama? Positive psychodrama promotes thriving, not only surviving, through the implementation of positive psychological intervention in action, in drama. The meaning of the word drama in Greek is action. And I think that the way I see it is that the rationale for the positive psychology intervention, and generally also, you can also say that it's true for psychodrama or positive psychodrama, is Lyubomirsky's sustainable happiness model that really shows that we have 40%, we can influence our subjective well-being or happiness to 40% of intentional activity. 50% is a genetic set point, 10% are circumstances, for example, socioeconomic status, marital status, etc., gender, but also 40%. 40% is a lot, and these 40% are those that really give the rationale for positive psychological interventions and for positive psychodrama interventions, intentional interventions. So I would like to go over 4 positive core concepts in psychodrama, and I will start by sharing the concept, and then I'll show you how we apply them in practice as a suggestion for practice and research that we are currently doing in Israel with population at risk. So the first concept is that we as human beings are both the creation of God or the supreme power, whatever you believe. It is not a theological, a religious discussion. It is more a spiritual or conceptual understanding of who we are as human beings. And we are also the creators of our own life story and role repertoire. And Moreno used the term role as a construct that really reflects different aspects of our life. For example, the role of the lover, the role of the father, the role of the professor, the role of the son, and etc. We have different roles in our lives. But as human beings, we are co-creators and we have mutual responsibility. So we are not only responsible to ourselves, we are also responsible to others. Two very basic twin concepts, they always go together in psychodrama, are spontaneity and creativity in this specific order. They are referred to as innate positive forces that, when cultivated through positive psychodrama, they can facilitate what Moreno defined as new responses to an old situation, which can be an old problem, and adequate response to new situation that can be both positive changes in our life, for example, moving to a new city, going to a new job, maybe a separation, maybe crisis in the family. All those changes that happen in life and are really, we cannot escape them, can be coped if we have enough spontaneity. And he defined spontaneity as a state, a mental state of readiness to respond in a creative way. And the creativity is actually the response. The response needs to be both new for an old situation, because if we're trying to solve an old problem with the same approach that haven't got us to a solution, we should probably change the way we are approaching the problem, and an adequate response to a new situation. In a way, I conceptualize it further as adaptation, and I've also developed out of these two concepts the concept of creative adaptability that I have published, and also developed a self-report instrument that can measure, and we have it in English, in Hebrew, in Chinese, and in Italian. And we're working on other translation for that, and it's been used in several studies so far. The third positive core concept in psychodrama is called a hunger to act, or act hunger. And it's really what the essence of what Moreno really means is that we have an urge, a hunger to act, not only to speak or to talk, like in talk therapy. And we have a need to reach a psychological act fulfillment via deep engagement in the drama, via deep engagement that, as you know, deep engagement is related to the experience of flow, the flow experience that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spoke about and researched extensively. The fourth core concept in psychodrama really talks about the interpersonal relationships, and he refers to the concept of encounter. Now, encounter does not refer to a conflict. It refers to a deep, direct, authentic, and meaningful interpersonal communication that foster positive relationships. And Moreno believed that we can only self-actualize through relationships, not in isolation. And this is the essence of why he believed in group therapy and not in individual therapy when you're isolated in your own psychodrama. But the group, the society, if we want, according to Moreno, to cure the community, to cure the society, we need to do a communal society work and not only an individual work. And this is a very interesting point that takes us back to the shift from psychoanalytic to psychodramatic. So I'm not going to get into it because in my university, I teach a whole course about positive psychodrama, but I can just say that the encounter between two people in a conflict, it can be two nations, and it can be a relationship between friends, between a boss and an employee, between partners. The encounter concept really comes to what we call in psychodrama the role reversal technique. When we change roles with the partner and we really step into their shoes and we try to experience how they experience their self, their lived experience, but also how they experience us. So using role reversal in psychodrama, in positive psychodrama, I can really try to facilitate some kind of a deep encounter that will take the perspective mentally and emotionally of other people or maybe other communities. So another important quote of Moreno is that people must be creative in order to survive. Because the more creative the personality, which means the person, the more problem it can solve. And the more creative it is, the better it can structure and predict the future. So how do we move this into practice? The idea is that psychodrama promote thriving through the implementation of positive psychological intervention in action, as I've said before. But you have to understand that the classical psychodrama focuses on mental illness. My work in the positive psychodrama adds to this a focus, zooming in to what we call mental health. And it's very interesting always to explain, especially students of clinical profession, that we are not eliminating the importance or the role of intervention that address depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses, but we are really trying to facilitate and foster some positive indices of mental health in order to provide the client with resources that they can really cope and manage those hardships in their life. So we are balancing the idea, and we're also targeting moving them from the lack of symptoms, as you know, into flourishing, into thriving. And the way we're doing it, I will give now examples, but I would like first to say a very interesting finding that some of you may already know, that address really the Seligman PERMA model that you probably know. There is a study that shows and reports that when you're using varied interventions or activities within a research program, it is more promising in terms of the result and is more useful in combating boredom and hedonic adaptations. And on this basis, we have created the positive psychodrama intervention program that I will show you now. And you will see that you're probably familiar with most of the topics that we are addressing, but the way that we're doing it are different. They're different than what we usually do in writing or just talk therapy. So I'll show you how it looks like. The first component is signature strength, identified and amplified in dramatized situation. After they are filling up the questionnaire, we can start playing, really playing and playing out, role-playing the different situation when I manifested my signature strength, or maybe situation when I didn't, and I would like to see why and how I can do it next time, and maybe rehearse for that. Supportive relationships, identified in one's positive social atom map, where there is an exercise or an assessment tool really in psychodrama that I also teach in different courses that is called social atom. You draw, it's similar to the genogram, if you know, that is used in family therapy, but is not exactly the same. And the way that I do it is that after you are constructing your supportive relationships, and I'm focusing on supportive relationship, we are bringing to this, from what I call from the page to the stage, those relationships, and we enhance the experience of meeting, encountering with those figures in the client's life that are supportive and meaningful for them. So The third topic is active constructive responses, practice and dramatize situations. The fourth is act of kindness, practice and dramatize situation. And you can see from week to week in the intervention that clients come back the other week and they report, you know, after we did this intervention or this exercise last session, I really did go to the street or did say something nice to the woman in the supermarket or said something nice to someone I don't know or help someone. And you can see how those things really go and really are applied in their actual life outside the therapy room. The fifth component is the gratitude. We are dramatizing an encounter in the here and now. So we are not only writing a letter, we are really bringing to the stage, we are putting an empty chair and the client speaks with the person really into details. Why are they grateful? What did they do? Into great details. And the encounter is very meaningful because we can see how the recipient of the gratitude is responding, and it's always very emotional to see how it goes, how the client perceived and experiences the perception of the receiver of the gratitude, and how it is manifested also on stage. Forgiveness, dramatize encounter in the here and now. Now I want to pause for a second and just say that in terms of forgiveness, my stance on this is that not everything can be really forgive in terms of the aggressor, in terms of the person who was hurt. They are not always inclined to forgive, but it's very, very important to emphasize that the forgiveness is a process of releasing yourself from the toxicity of not forgiving. So forgiveness is a self-care act. Coping challenges, we are using the hero's journey as an infrastructure to identify the coping challenges of Muli Lahad that are called basic PH. And optimism, positive explanatory style, practice in dramatized situations. Seligman also talks about it. And finally, hope, talking from the future self to the present self, kind of guiding and highlighting the pathways and the agency thinking for a sense of achievement and self-actualization. So these are the 9 topics that we cover in the intervention. And to conclude my presentation, I would like to show you a quick clip that we created with testimonials of some clients.
אני תמיד רציתי לשחק. אני כל כך, לא יודעת, רציתי תמיד לשחק. וזה היה ממש מעניין, כי פתאום אני אבא, פתאום אני ילד קטן. את יודעת מה שחשוב? שהסיפור שסיפרו, אני עוברת דרך עצמי. ואני רוצה מי שסיפר שהרגיש שאני גם מרגישה איך היה לה. זה היה לי חשוב לעשות ככה. סיפרנו על הילדות. זה, את יודעת, פתאום את ילדה קטנה ואת רואה. ואת מרגישה את כאילו אמא מחבקת אותך, אבא מנשק אותך. זה כל כך טוב.
באותו רגע שאת משתפת פעולה, את שוכחת שהיה יותר עמיתים, היה פה על ידים, אחד מול השני. אני הרגשתי שאני שם, לא יעזור, זה היה ממש אמיתי.
זה לא היה גבול את הטלוויזיה, אני לא ראיתי את הגבול של טלוויזיה, אני הייתי בשיחה, כאילו באותו בית, באותו חדר. זה היה ככה, תמיד אני הייתי מרגישה ככה.
בסך הכל זה מאוד תורם לרוגע, זה מאוד תורם להעלאה של הנושא שלך כשאתה מעלה אותו, אז זה כאילו אתה שופך מלבך את המועקה.
צריכים להכיר כל המבוגרים את הדבר הזה, וזה חסר. אפילו אנשים שבמיטה, והם מרגישים שייכות לאיזה מסגרת, אפילו לא יכולים לצאת מהבית, זה מחבר אותם שהם עוד חשובים. זו תוכנית מדהימה, מה שהם נותנים.
אנחנו עם ילדים, תודה לאל הם טובים, נכדים, אבל אני כל כך מבינה שיש החיים משלהם, והם לא עסוקים, הם כל הזמן חושבים עליי, אני בטוחה, והם מתקשרים, אבל לבוא, הם לא יכולים באמצע שבוע, ואני לבד, ופתאום בערב יש פגישה כזאת, שמסתכלים אליי ומקשיבים לה, זה טוב.
כשאתה מדבר, מוציא, אתה לפעמים מקבל עזרה שלא ידעת מאיפה זה בא לך, ואתה לא חשבת שתוכל להיעזר בצורה כזו, אם אתה מוציא מה שיש.
זה עשה לי טוב, השתחררתי, כאילו היה לי משהו שהרגשתי יותר קל אחרי הנפשית, אחרי המשחק.
אני הייתי מרגישה טוב, היה לי קצת, לא קצת, היה לפעמים הרבה טוב. ותודה מכל הלב שאתם עושים את זה.
So as you saw, this intervention was an intervention that of a research by me and my colleague Dr. Shoshi Kaysari and our doctoral student Talia El-Karif. And here I forgot to say that it was an online intervention because of COVID. And that's why they said that it was, even if that it was through a special platform that is called Uniper Care, that is on their TV, they felt as if they were together, even though they were isolated, and each older adult was in their own room. So this is just a paper of mine that I've already published in 2019 about positive psychodrama, if you're interested. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Hod, thank you. That was really fascinating. What a tremendous overview of the field of positive psychodrama, and both from a research standpoint, a practice standpoint, and then allowing us to feel the energy that those participants were reporting. That's really beautiful. Thank you. So we're going to move right into our second speaker at this point. Our second speaker is Dr. Nisha Sajnani. And Nisha is an associate professor and director of the graduate program in drama therapy and theater and the health lab, and faculty in the rehabilitation sciences and educational theater doctoral programs at New York University. Dr. Sajnani is a co-founding co-director of the Jameel Arts and Health Lab, established in collaboration with the World Health Organization, where she leads the Lancet Global Series on the health benefits of the arts. Her publications reflect interests in drama therapy and broader arts and health processes and outcomes, creative methodologies, and concerns related to health justice. Alongside her peer-reviewed publications, recent books include Trauma-Informed Drama Therapy and Intercultural Drama Therapy. As a policy advocate, she currently leads several policy briefs pertaining to the arts and health in collaboration with the World Health Organization, including a recently published technical brief on the role of the arts in supporting the mental well-being of people who are forcibly displaced. She received her PhD in interdisciplinary studies combining drama therapy and community economic development from the School of Community and Public Affairs at Concordia University in Montreal. Nisha, it's delightful to have you with us. We turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you so much, James and Catherine and Sarah and colleagues for the invitation to join you. And thank you, Hod, for setting such a wonderful tone. I'll just share my screen here. I was just struck by something you said, Hod, with regards to Moreno's reference to people needing creativity in order to survive. And I decided to add this slide in, you know, an idea that goes back to our Universal Declaration of Rights and Freedoms, 1948, speaking to the right that each of us has to participate in the cultural life of a community and to enjoy the arts and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits, and how we have in many ways lost that the focus on creativity, engagement in the arts and cultural life, certainly not in a group like this, but your presentation really really highlighted the ways in which positive psychology brings that to the fore. So I met with James at our launch of the WHO Arts and Health Initiative at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York in 2021. And then later met Catherine and James last year at the launch of a colleagues lab in Italy, also focusing on culture and health. And then Catherine again at the recent APA conference in DC, where she suggested that it might be interesting to share the story of the Jameel Arts and Health Lab with you. So rather than focusing on drama therapy specific research, what I'd like to do today is share the story of our lab insofar as it relates to our shared aims to support the flourishing of a global arts and health movement in the US and around the world to create a conducive environment or a stage, to use a theater analogy, from which we can communicate and implement the work that you're doing in the Humanities and Human Flourishing project, and in the larger ecosystem of arts and health, so that our research, like Hod's, for example, can make a greater impact. And what I'm really looking forward to is a conversation about how a flourishing paradigm can orient us to possibilities that could be further developed. So the lab was founded last year as a collaboration between WHO Europe, NYU Steinhardt, Community Jameel, and Culture Runners, with a mission to advance research on the health benefits of the arts and to accelerate the implementation of evidence through 193 UN member states, with a particular focus on lower and middle income countries. The lab is led by a 4-person team: Christopher Bailey and Neil Fichte from the WHO, Chris from WHO headquarters, Neil Fichte from the Behavioral and Cultural Insights Unit at WHO Europe, Stephen Stapleton from Culture Runners, and myself. And we have a growing team focused on research, policy development, and communications, and an international steering committee. And here's a snapshot of the lab model, where you can see first that we're beginning with an investment of imagination, of time, of effort, of capital, which has enabled internal capacity building to support 3 main overlapping areas: research, outreach, and policy. Research and evaluation to measure the impact of arts-based interventions, outreach to tell the story of this research, disseminate and socialize the outcomes, meet with potential research funding media and policy partners, and of course to mobilize a global network to ultimately change the story about the value of applied humanities, neuroaesthetics, creative arts therapies, and the role of the arts and artists in mainstream medicine and public health. So often the synergy between research, outreach, and policy doesn't look like a traditional academic conference, but perhaps rather like a concert like this one, which we held in collaboration with the Music and Wellbeing Program at Carnegie Hall during the UN General Assembly last September, in which Henry Watkins on piano and soprano Joyce DiDonato invited an audience of mostly UN representatives to experience singing together, which created a receptive environment to announce new research led by the lab. And as James had already mentioned, in particular, we announced the Lancet series, which we are leading on the health benefits of the arts, which was announced by Sir Jeremy Farrar, Chief Scientist of the WHO. And I'll add some links in the chat a little bit later to some of the news pieces that have come out about this, as well as the published comment. So the series itself brings together researchers from over 50 institutions around the world who are working in teams to develop 4 papers and 1 photo essay, which is a rather new development for the Lancet. To give you a sense of what the papers are, at present, these are the ones that are planned. Of course, all of these are subject to peer review. So there's an introductory conceptual framework for understanding the contribution of general and targeted arts engagement to health outcomes, which I'm leading together with my colleague Niels. Of course, we're involved in all of them. Hod is also involved in that first paper. Jill Sonke and Michael Tan are leading this second paper, which is a systematic review of primary research focusing on the role of the arts in health promotion and prevention, with a focus on non-communicable diseases, including mental health and brain health, followed by a third paper, which is led by our colleagues Martina de Witt and Jurka Brandt, looking at it's an umbrella review and meta-analysis focusing on the effects of the creative arts therapies and therapeutic arts, here looking specifically at the treatment and management of NCDs. And then we'll conclude with an epidemiological study. So having explored and established the existing evidence base around the role of the arts in supporting health in the previous papers, this fourth paper will consist of an epidemiological approach to explore predictors of health, of arts engagement for health, rather. So the plan is to use cohort study data sets from a minimum of 6 countries, including the US, England, Brazil, India, Japan, and Mexico, and others. This paper will examine who is engaging in the arts, where and why, and will include a meta-analysis of findings to identify micro-predictors like gender, age, individual level types of predictors, as well as meso-predictors, community level predictors, and macro-predictors, national level, for example, GDP, social inequalities, life expectancy, and so on, towards identifying what actions and recommendations are needed in order to ensure that the health benefits of the arts engagement are accessible to everyone. And then we'll end with a photo essay and ideally weave photos throughout, again, trying to visualize and value the arts throughout the research process and in how we share it and what is shared. I'll just say a little bit about framework. When we think about the arts and health, again, this may not be new to those who've joined this meeting here today, but we're thinking about the arts as a discipline, as a profession, as a field. There are a number of programs throughout the US that offer training in the arts and health, in the creative arts therapies that are mobilizing efforts towards social prescribing and arts on prescription in particular. As a profession, certainly the creative arts therapies are a profession. And then there are efforts towards formalizing artists in residence and community health workers as a profession with their own standards of practice and ethical guidelines. And of course, there are a number of hallmarks of a discipline here where you have academic training programs, specific discipline journals, taxonomies that help us understand how we orient ourselves to each other. We can think about the arts and health or arts in health along a continuum where you have creative arts therapies rather, or you have a focus on management and treatment on the clinical end or on the healthcare side, and health promotion and disease prevention on the other. And we can also think about it in terms of targeted and non-targeted interventions where you might have creative arts therapists, for example, or artists working in healthcare settings, or physicians prescribing arts interventions as more targeted care versus or along a continuum of more receptive practice where one is gaining health benefits from attending a performance, listening to a concert or music, or engaging in creative hobbies, or even arts in schools. So we can, of course, argue that these are blended, that you can have targeted interventions in schools as well. And of course, there's a lot of evidence that has been built up in this level, in this area. At the population level, we have evidence that speaks to how engagement in the arts reduces mental health and depression, or mental illness and depression, promotes healthy aging, decreases mortality risk. At the individual level, dance has been demonstrated, even more so than exercise, to have a positive impact on quality of life. It can reduce pain, and of course, it's multimodal, so it's engaging us physically and socially and so on. And so you can see here that it can have an impact on cardiovascular disease. I've mentioned some of this already, but there's a practical and financial value when we think about policy advocacy in this area. Again, we can't break down the arts into one specific concrete action that we're engaging in, or rather that's engaging on us, because they are working on us imaginatively, socially, emotionally, cognitively, physically, and so on at the same time. They're generally appealing and motivating to participate in, low risk and cost effective. And of course, we need more research to speak to the cost effectiveness piece. There's a number of other arts projects or arts interventions that the lab is engaged in evaluating and researching. At the moment, I won't have time to get into all of them. There's another one that's not on this slide that has to do with the role of the arts in addressing the health impacts of climate change, but I would be happy to speak to that later in our discussion if there's interest. And we're thinking, some of you are very familiar with the Landmark Scoping Review, which was published by the WHO in 2019, which synthesized findings from over 900 studies, some of which were reviews, so really representing upwards of 3,000 plus primary studies, which offered evidence for the role of the arts in health promotion, illness prevention, and the treatment and management of disease. And it also began to lay out a framework for understanding mechanisms or core components or ingredients or therapeutic factors involved in arts interventions, which is an area that Hod and I have also been involved with other creative arts therapists, looking at therapeutic factors in creative arts therapies, for example. And so now we're really thinking about what is the next big report. And of course, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this as well. We're thinking in the realm of public health, might the next report focus on how does engaging in the arts affect population health? Can all people access the arts equally? Does it allow us to advance our understanding of the cost effectiveness, for example? And in the area of clinical health, how do arts interventions and creative arts therapies support coping and care? There are a number of questions that we can ask, but we're engaging in this process right now of planning out that next report. In the area of outreach, we really think about, again, setting that stage, cultivating a conducive environment for the flourishing of the field. And we think about choosing outreach opportunities along these lines. Does it allow us to disseminate and creatively translate research? Does it allow us to grow the network with a focus on global majority and lower and middle income countries? Does it allow us to demonstrate practice or fundraise for the lab? And certainly, does it allow us to sustain momentum in this field? The top photograph there is from our colleagues, Fadi Jameel, George Richards, Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the WHO, Christopher Bailey, and colleagues from the WHO Foundation. And the photo down below is on a visit to Nigeria during their Arts and Health Week. These are just some of the engagements that we participated in and co-created or co-produced over this past year. It was a very busy year. I would say, I don't know that we'll repeat something this busy again, but it was very full, a big launch year for us. Let's see, I'll highlight just a couple of things. The WHO 75th Anniversary Healing Arts Concert. Of course, there was the launch. There was also the inaugural Global South Arts and Health Week, which mobilizes arts and health activity, research, policy development across 28 countries in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia. And we also mobilized some research for COP28 this past year, and we'll be continuing down that vein. These are just a few campaign highlights, images from some of the outreach activities and some of the outreach partners that we worked with over 2023, as well as some of the media partners that helped us to tell the story. Of course, all of us are engaged in other academic and cultural engagements throughout the year as well to offer a glimpse into what's happening with the lab and how we are interacting with partners around the world. This year, we have a few highlighted in green that are priority areas for us. We anticipate that we'll be in a good position to be able to offer a technical brief on the arts and health at the next World Health Assembly in May. And participate again in Healing Arts and Health Week in Nigeria, as well as in organizing events for the UN General Assembly. A few more opportunities. And then from an outreach perspective, I'm excited to share that we'll be launching a lovely dedicated website around this work in March. Right now, we have a placeholder up. If you were to go to Jameel Arts Health Lab, you'd see a placeholder up with some of our activities, but you can look forward. I would invite you to come back and take a look in a month's time. In the area of policy, our colleagues at the WHO Collaborating Centre for the Arts and Health at University College London had been populating this map of international arts and health policy, which to date contains about 172 relevant policy documents that shed light on the global progress that's being made towards enabling greater access and engagement. And of course, we can draw on this map to support our own efforts in the US and in our respective countries. And in analyzing these policies, many health and arts policymakers view the relationship between the arts engagement and improved health in quite general terms, although there are some, like the Finnish Parliament, for example, who are investigating, or rather investing in more targeted applications of the arts to address specific public health issues such as mental health or healthy aging or social isolation. And then you have a handful of policies from England, from Ireland, from Scotland, for example, who also recognize a clear role for the arts and culture in supporting population mental health and economic recovery from COVID-19, for example. A few documents make commitments to health-focused work in particular settings, such as the National Arts Council Singapore's art strategy that pledged to bring the arts to underreached communities in places such as hospitals and nursing homes. However, the most promising and concrete commitments are happening when health and arts ministries or agencies work together on policy development. So we're interested in analyzing the policies that exist, of course, but we're also interested in stimulating the process of policy development. So a key goal of the lab is to influence policy, to inspire systemic change, which can ideally, of course, impact the lives of millions of people around the world, because we don't need to, give a second thought to maintaining the arts in schools, for example. We understand it as critical, as vital to human development, vital to our overall human flourishing, for example. So I'm not just thinking about health and cultural ministries. We also need to be working intersectorally with education and other ministries, administrations of aging, and so on, in order to be able to produce the kinds of effects that we're looking for. In 2023, we had a number of gains in terms of advancing policy in the EU through the G20 Culture Working Group. We published the brief that James mentioned around the arts and health with forcibly displaced persons. This actually predates the lab, but I was able to contribute to it, and have since, the WHO Europe has published a document on the role of the arts in NCD prevention and control, as well as a thinking tool on adapting and implementing arts and health interventions. Most recently, in fact, just last week, I participated in the White House NEA Summit on Arts and Culture, which really picks up on Biden's executive order issued last year, actually 2022, in which he was looking at the role of the arts and humanities and libraries in advancing, the well-being, the health, vitality, and democracy of the nation. And I co-hosted the Arts and Health Pre-Summit Caucus. That's a photo there of federal agency representatives, as well as arts and health leaders across the country. Of course, just a small group of them. There are many arts and health leaders right here, of course, in this Zoom space, but a small group that hopefully will continue to grow into a broader network as we think about the kinds of policy pathways that we need to build to make this work commonplace. These are just a few highlights from the summit. All of it's been recorded, and you can watch the entire thing streaming online. Second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, speaking about the role of the arts in civic infrastructure and democracy, and a wonderful talk, fireside chat between the NEA chair, Maria Rosario Jackson, with U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, speaking about the crisis of social isolation, and Vivek's really speaking to the role of the arts in facilitating expression and connection. There are a number of policy briefs that we'll be working on. We hope to continue with this year into next on the arts, health, and climate, on the arts and helping professionals. Hod is working with us on the arts and health in the digital space, and arts and brain health. We were also really pleased to see Dr. Tedros inaugurate the first two global ambassadors in the area of arts and health, Priti Ende and Renee Fleming, both sopranos. And I will say that we had some influence here because we co-produced the 75th anniversary concert at Victoria Hall in Geneva, where we had invited both of them to sing, and that led to a series of conversations with Dr. Tedros, which ultimately led to the appointment. And I'm just going to share with you what it means to have a global ambassador in this space. I'll share with you a few words from Renee Fleming, who was invited to open the World Health Assembly last year to speak to those 194, in fact, health ministers around the world.
The connection between arts and health isn't new. This has existed really since the beginning of mankind, because we have been together as social entities, as groups, generally speaking, through the arts, through singing, vocalization, painting, theater, All of these things have united us, which is part of health. We now understand that we need this actually for mental health, which is something that we're really struggling with across the globe right now. But science looking at arts and health is something relatively new. It's through brain scanning, through the ability to do research that uncovers the biology of how we absorb the arts, how we appreciate it, what it does to us, but also how various therapies and creative arts therapies can improve our lives throughout the lifespan. There's no question that the pandemic unlocked the understanding that we are creative people, that we need to also engage with each other creatively. So when people were isolated and were lonesome and lonely, they started getting on balconies and performing. They started performing outside of loved one's window when they couldn't actually get into the hospital. So this mode of communication came back very quickly, and I think there was a tremendous aha moment for the public when they realized that, hey, there's really something important here. This is who we are. The connection.
We look forward to being able to advance this work ultimately with the goal to see a World Health Assembly resolution on the arts and health, hopefully by 2025. I think we're making good progress in that direction, but we will stay in conversation about that. And that's what I'm looking forward to now. Thank you very much.
Nisha, thank you. What a marvelous profusion of ideas and actions and possibilities and directions to take, which is both, as Renee mentioned, as old as humanity in some respects, and as she also mentioned, as new as the latest breakthroughs in neuroscience in other directions. This is just really, really marvelous. Thank you for that presentation. And what I'd like to do now is just move into a few minutes of conversation now with Hod and Nisha. So Hod, I'd like to begin with you and just ask for your thoughts and some of the highlights for you from the work that Nisha and the presentation that Nisha just gave.
Yes, so one of the words that really got me were when Renee Fleming talked about isolation. And I realized that in our study, when we did the study about drama doing remotely, we really realized, I think that we were there during COVID and we realized that arts are really humanizing our experience as human being and connecting us together and helping us to express ourselves in a way that we couldn't do verbally and we didn't have the words to do. And I can also share that in the situation that's happening in the Middle East, we see how arts can really help people cope with the catastrophe that's happening. So arts are really not privileged. They are used to help us explore ourselves, express ourselves, and connect. And for me, one of the most important is also being able to really try, as much as we can, to step into the shoes of another person and try to understand them, their narrative, their background, where they come from. And can you imagine how the world would look if we could really try to do this using the arts? That's something that for me is also a vision. And I really connect to the wider scope that Nisha is leading internationally for the last few years, because I think that we are really seeing a global movement. And it's a wonderful way of doing it. I'm happy to be part of it, and I think it's wonderful. And I didn't know that there's supposed to be a resolution in 2025. That would be amazing, because what we know is that different countries around the world are in different phases. Like we are talking about, for example, the global south, we're talking about the Middle East, we're talking about other countries in other places of the world. We're not all in the same this process of realizing, recognizing the health benefits of the arts, we're not in the same place. And I think that the work that Nisha is doing with the WHO and with the United Nations is so important in order to convince policymakers around the globe to give the resources, to give the whatever is needed to take it forward. And I'm doing my own 2 cents in this, so.
I think it's much more than 2 cents, Hod, but appreciate your humility and your contributions. Building on what Hod just said, Nisha, I wonder if you could say something about the role of evidence or the interconnection between evidence and policy. So I know that you mentioned arts funding cuts in schools and those kinds. These are the kinds of things that just really hit us hard when we hear of one more, both in elementary schools, but then also in universities, shifting away from the arts and humanities and so forth. And so many of us wonder, well, what can we do to wake people up to the importance of the arts, of the humanities in these regards? And I'm curious, in your work, to what degree is evidence really crucial? To what degree is evidence enough? Are there other components to it? Is it a collaboration between evidence and celebrities, people like Renee Fleming, and concerts, and really getting people into those spaces of being able to experience it for themselves? What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess all we have to do is really reflect on the paranoia around Taylor Swift. At the moment, to ask ourselves, does celebrity have something to do with politics and policy? Absolutely. I mean, absolutely anything that encourages people's receptivity and capacity to listen or to take in ideas. I mean, influencer culture, is arising out of that. I think when we think about policy development, we're thinking about the confluence of evidence and encounter and outreach, that these things come together. So I in talking about policy, shifted to an example from a concert, because, for example, when we were at that WHO 75 concert in Geneva, we had some 1,200 country representatives in the audience, and we didn't share a shred of evidence. We had evidence linked in the program, and people could read what they wished, but we first needed to, in your words, wake people up, which involves aesthetic engagement, to inspire through the senses, to become alive in the moment, happens in such a delightful and powerful way when we encounter and participate in the arts. And so there's a reception that was open, a receptivity that was open in that concert, that then prompted representatives to come up and say, gosh, this is so interesting. Is this something I can do in my own country? And of course, the response was, well, you already are, and it's already happening. And let's pay attention to where it's happening. And, when it comes down to looking at expansions to Medicare and Medicaid, I mean, of course, we need the evidence. We're definitely going to rely on good evidence there in order to make good decisions around what should be funded, but it's not going to work by itself. It's not evidence alone. It's the story, it's the feeling, it's the encounter, it's the personal stakes. All of those things matter. I'm reminded, Nisha, of a story that Marty Seligman likes to tell about the role of positive psychology in the United Kingdom and psychotherapy and so forth there. And he was having a conversation with Lord Richard Layard in the UK, and Richard Layard was excited about some of the perspectives and research that Marty Seligman and positive psychology in general were beginning to make clear. And so Richard Layard said to Marty, we should do something, in the UK. And Marty said, well, sounds great. Shall we do some pilot studies? Shall we, kind of look to see what the benefits of this kind of therapy might be in the populations and so forth? And Richard Layard looked at him, Marty said, it's like, you don't get politics, do you? Like, this isn't about, what as researchers we might think, well, what would be the next step and what would be, and so forth. And as you say, that's all super important. But in terms of how to make change, that's only one part of it, right? And
when you have this opening, when you have a kind of sense that people are willing to take those next steps, you can't say to them, great, I'll get back to you in 3 years once we have the results of our pilot study, right?
And, and sometimes it's a matter of actually acting on the evidence that's already there. I mean, one of the big recommendations that came out of that 2019 report was actually we have a good body of evidence. We need to move towards implementation and to actually take those recommendations that come out of 3 years of hard work and effort and funding seriously. So let's move towards it. We just had a conversation with the one of the leads for perinatal care at WHO headquarters, and she was saying, "Oh, I'm so interested in this arts and health initiative, and is there anything in the realm of perinatal care?" And there, just last month, there was a group of researchers that had published a systematic review of RCTs, and we're not only valorizing RCTs. We can talk about methodological diversity and the value of that, but in this case, it happened to be a systematic review of RCTs. And immediately, my colleague Niels was able to point to the bottom line. This is what they are suggesting. Can you take that forward? And she said, yes, she'll take it forward with her committee to start to sensitize them to this research. And so we can really think about, a norm, moving towards the WHO's normative function, which is setting guidelines around different health outcome areas, and thinking about how do we then start to embed research around music and perinatal care, for example, into those guidelines. That to us is like the holy grail of this partnership. And it came out of her interest, it came out of conversation, and it's going to come out of a dedicated walk together.
Mm. Terrific. I'd like, Nisha, to invite you to think specifically about what Hod presented at the beginning of our session with regard to an example of, I think, important research that's being done along these lines. And I'm curious what stood out to you from his presentation, or what stands out to you from his work as a way of focusing on a storied approach to psychotherapy and infusing it with new research dimensions and new theoretical dimensions too, in terms of focusing not just on pathology, but also on, kind of thriving, as he put it as well. Curious what your thoughts are.
I think that we're very aligned in a salutogenic approach, looking at the strengths and the and life. And I appreciate Hod's always has such clarity in your presentations, Hod, and I also appreciated the Moreno's call to bring joy back into psychiatry. And joy and fun is always given a bad rap, like it's just on the side, like, hey, it was fun too. Whereas actually we could center joy, we can center fun, we can center the kind of vitality that comes out of action-oriented processes like psychodrama, like the work that we do in drama therapy, because it engages us in a more holistic way. It engages our body minds. It engages our emotions, our physicality in the process of discovery. So appreciating the emphasis on joy, and then the clarity of how this unfolds in a positive psychodramatic process that you've been teaching. And of course, the call to the creativity that's innate in every human being, and what we can do to tap into that.
So let me build on that. I think everything you said is terrific, and I'm wondering if we could hear both from Hod and from Nisha in response to this following question. And let me just mention to everyone that when we're done with this question, we'll open it up to your thoughts and comments and questions as audience. So I know that a few of you have been posting things in the chat. Please continue to do that, and then we'll open it up to anyone who'd like to raise their Zoom hand and contribute verbally as well. My question is really kind of taking psychodrama perhaps as a kind of exemplar for the role of the arts and humanities in our culture more generally. And so, Hod, forgive me if I get this wrong, but I've had a pretty good teacher on psychodrama, this guy named Hod Orkibi. I also have a colleague, Dan Tomasulo, who is within the field of positive psychology and is a leader in this domain as well. My understanding, and as you mentioned earlier, is that Moreno really began psychodrama as a therapy. It was oriented toward mitigation of mental illness or social illness, like the problems that people had, right? And then you have developed it, and others have developed it forward into a kind of positive psychodrama, which doesn't negate the roots, doesn't pretend that we don't have problems, but realizes that, as you said, it needs to be balanced out, right? And so we want to live healthy lives, which doesn't just mean, as Marty Seligman in positive psychology has pointed out, it doesn't just mean being disease-free. It means also, as you say, thriving. I like to use the term flourishing, right? In that kind of broad dimension, right? So if we think of that as a kind of model and process, I'm curious in a second, Hod, what your comments are about that. And then Nisha, is that a journey that we're on with arts and health, in the sense that it's harder to get people's attention, policymakers' attention, if you say, hey, there are a lot of people who are smiling. Can we get them to laugh? Right? How much money can we really put towards that? But if we can say there are people who are suffering, and we can alleviate that suffering through this research, that understandably and justifiably, that gets people's attention. We don't want to stop there, though, I would assume, right? It's not just about how can we use arts and the humanities and culture in these kinds of clinical contexts, but as you mentioned in terms of the public health, and I would even say, public flourishing. Like, shouldn't this be part of what it means to be a human being, not merely because we want to avoid getting ill, but because we want to flourish as human beings? So first, Hod, your thoughts about this process within the kind of perspective of psychodrama, and then Nisha, I'm curious about your broader thoughts about arts and healing.
Yes, so I want to say first that I think that the evidence that we are collecting throughout the years gets us, through the door. Then, I have this situation in Israel with the Ministry of Health. So the evidence gets you through the door, then everything else comes into the picture. That's just to say a comment about your question before that. So Nisha and I actually have a systematic review that we are going to present tomorrow at NYU Symposium. And our results show that psychodrama and drama therapy similarly are effective in both illness reduction and health promotion, which means basically looking at negative outcomes versus positive outcomes. So we can really see that psychodrama and drama therapy really work on both levels. And you asked me about how positive psychodrama, and actually what I write in my paper is that I didn't really revise Moreno's theory. What I did is that I went back to his writing, which are very, very, a little bit chaotic sometimes. And I've actually just put a different kind of Googles on me in order to pinpoint those ingredients that were already positive in his thinking. So as a counteract, Freud that talked about id and ego and all those struggles within the human soul, Moreno really looked originally as people as positive entities, and the creativity and spontaneity as two positive forces within the individual. And as we grow older, because of culture, because of life experiences, they are diminishing. Psychodrama essentially, originally, was about, as you said, elevating people, trying to reinforce or maybe to put more light on the positive resources that they have. What happened is that Moreno was developing psychodrama after World War I. What happened is that after, as Seligman himself says, after World War II, everything went negative. The DSM, the ACT, the veterans. So what really happened is that everything went down because of the context and what happened in the world. But originally, Moreno really looked at psychodrama as a positive method, but something changed that. So what I'm doing is basically trying to pinpoint the positive ingredients in his theory, just to bring them to the front. So yeah, going back to his original thoughts, that's what I did. And I think that, as you said, they might not want to see people happier, but the way I'm explaining it is that we're giving them the positive experiences or the positive resources in order to help them cope with the mental illness. We need to balance the support we give. So that's the way I'm explaining it. Applying for funds, applying for support for the program and the research.
Really fascinating, Hod. Thank you for that context to kind of help us understand that more fully. Fantastic. Nisha, curious what your thoughts are.
In some of the countries that I've been teaching in or visiting, I've been surprised to learn that they have ministries dedicated to happiness. And sometimes those ministries are focused on how happiness increases productivity. So we can still see that tied to capitalist outcomes, to economic outcomes. And in some cases, it's about understanding a more holistic understanding of, of what allows a country to flourish, really, and that putting attention on happiness, on joy, and on what increases quality of life is actually good for everyone. I think that Lorraine asked a question in the chat related to the kinds of tools we use to measure outcomes in the creative arts therapies. And I would say in the creative arts therapies and in the arts and health in general, we do ourselves a disservice if we only focus on deficit-based measures, and we need to be incorporating, and I know that you've written extensively around this as well, about this as well, we need to be including asset-based measures. And in our work through the lab, we place emphasis on incorporating a quality of life scale or measures of hope, for example. And whenever we hear about, for example, creative self-efficacy scales, opportunities to really lift up what's working well, we hold on to that. We want to learn more about it, and we want to see if we can integrate it into the kinds of studies that we're doing, because of course there are many more measures out there that are focused on reducing what's not going well, which is also important. And from a public health standpoint, of course, we're motivated by, not just from a public health standpoint, but individual standpoint too. We don't like pain. We want to reduce the pain. So it's both, but we can't forget the strengths that we're trying to build up along the way.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Nisha. So if you would like to ask a question, make a comment, please raise your Zoom hand, and we'll welcome you into our discussion here. So Nisha and Hod, it seems to me that part of what's interesting and challenging here is the conceptual space, where it's easy to get focused in on just one side of the equation. And it feels to me that each side of the equation is important in its own right. In other words, if I go to the doctor and the doctor never asks me about my symptoms, about what's wrong, what's not going well, I would wonder whether this is a doctor I'd want to come back to, right? So it really is important to have times and occasions in our lives when we focus on saying what's wrong, what's not going well, right? The problem is that can take over everything we do, and we can lose sight of the fact that that's not all of life, and that there are things that really go well sometimes, or could go well, and it's important, I think, to have, okay, let's focus specifically on what's one thing in your life that's really going well, right? And then third, to integrate those in some kind. They're not reducible to each other, but as you said, Hod, once you begin to cope, then you're able to address some of the issues that you're dealing with, some of what's going wrong, and you're able then to move into directions of thriving. So it feels to me almost like a dialectical movement, where each of those spots on the journey are crucial and critical, and it's easy to get stuck in them and not get out.
I agree.
Yes, I agree. And I have to say that when you're training therapists, most students originally really relate to the mental illness model. And it takes time for them to understand that positive psychodrama or positive psychology is not just putting a rosy glasses. It's really deeper, and it really, as you said, I like your conceptualization of dynamic between the movement, and I actually do it. I actually see how even if you go and work on gratitude, on our strength, most of the time, 99% of the time, it will go through hardship, some kind of a stressful situation that I was able to maybe cope with those strengths. So that's what we're trying. It's like benefit finding and trying to find what works. Where are the situations that it did work, the exceptional situation, they call it in narrative therapy. So I'm kind of blending all those, and this is exactly as you said, James, really shifting between the two, counteracting.
Yeah. Fantastic. Jen, you had a very interesting comment and question, Jen Rossano, in the chat. I wonder if you wouldn't mind unmuting and kind of asking it verbally.
Sure. Thanks, James. So one of the things that occurred to me was I was thinking about like arts and humanities as medicine, which made me think of the food as medicine movement, which has been trying to get some traction and how difficult that is to get those kind of RXs to be paid for, whether you look at like precision meals that are now being developed. And it raises this question specific to the US, where we have a very particular system of healthcare delivery, and the general idea that like, well, what is the financial incentive to have these programs integrated? What evidence do we have? So whether and we have issues even getting things like acupuncture or other like non-traditional physical interventions, right, sort of through the system and paid for. So I guess I'm wondering about, how do we build the evidence? Because you showed us, Nisha, this great map, right? And there were like 2 dots in the US compared to everywhere else in the globe. So I'm wondering about, what evidence we do need to make this a better sell given the US system of healthcare. And then I guess related, my question is also like, well, for the efforts where we're at now, should we be focusing on the clinical healthcare side? Should we be focusing more on the policy side? Should we be focused on talking to individuals through some of the platforms and events that have been kind of raised here?
I think all of the above. I mean, I'm thinking about a few examples where the return of on investment has been well argued and well defended. And, I think about the arts on prescription movement that has come out of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the arts pharmacy group that is looking to, that has been piloting relationships between physicians and cultural activity providers, not necessarily arts therapists, because that's further on a clinical side of the continuum, but opportunities for arts engagement in their own communities. Can physicians prescribe these because of their evidence-based benefits, the evidence around it, the fact that it will reduce social isolation, or from a positive point of view, increase social connection, and that this, of course, has an impact on mental health and all kinds of other conditions. And that's being piloted in different states. It's not necessarily relying on Medicare to expand in those states before it happens. I think people are being quite entrepreneurial about it and figuring out a way for this work to move forward until there's a tipping point and it becomes just the way we need to do things, because there is also research that speaks to the return on investment, or rather the cost savings in early prevention and in preventative care, and that this is also part of preventative care and health promotion. The study that I pointed to in the Lancet series, the epidemiological study, is taking a look at access to arts engagement, and is there a correlation between that and health outcomes later in life? And the US will be a data set in there. So I'm really curious to see what will come out of that, because you need that kind of research along with the community mobilization, along with the encounters and opportunities for, engagement to change minds and to shift investment and to move a to move a executive order like the one that Biden made in 2022 into the Appropriations Committee, into Ways and Means, and actually give it some fuel, give it some investment, and get it some teeth.
Thank you.
Great. Alina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Hod and Nisha, for a wonderful discussion. Super interesting concepts are being discussed, and I'm curious to see their further implementations in the world. I have a question to Hod. Hod, I find the point about being responsible for the world that we create and everyone in it very interesting. So I'm wondering, what are some potential group effects of psychodrama, of being able to put yourself into other person's shoes in front of the group through psychodrama? For example, if there is any evidence of potential improvement in the sense of connection, belonging, maybe like openness to experience or confidence in psychodrama groups collectively. Thank you.
There are actually there are several, not a lot, but a few studies on the psychodramatic techniques, and one of the studies really focuses on the different techniques, and role reversal is the technical, the clinical manifestation of encounter, of putting yourself in, literally putting yourself in the other people's shoes. It's a very powerful and effective tool, procedure, if you may, for empathy, for perspective taking, and for really understanding another person's position. I think that it could be applied in an intergroup, outer group study, for example, within communities. So that's something that is still to do. The problem with psychodrama and drama therapy is that most of the training programs are less research oriented, especially in Europe, and NYU and Haifa University. We have our labs and we're doing those research, but we need more collaborations. So this is also an opportunity to invite you, everyone, collaborate with us if you have ideas that we may develop further.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Alina, for that question. Just maybe one final comment or observation, and just curious, Hod and Nisha, what your thoughts are on this. I was riding the elevator in my the apartment building where I live one day, and a woman stopped me, and she said, "Are you the guy that there was a write-up in our local newsletter about the work that we had been doing with the Humanities and Human Flourishing?" And she said, "Are you the guy who's doing that work with the Humanities?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "That's really important." She said, "I was a teacher at a university. I won't say where, but I was a teacher at a university. I taught literature, and we weren't allowed to talk about how literature helps people. We had to focus on, all of these disciplinary kinds of disputes and so forth. But my students really needed to be able to engage with literature as a way of helping them in their lives, right? And as I reflect on how quickly, at least it feels to me, arts and healing and psychodrama, positive psychodrama, and these positive approaches to the arts and humanities have resonated and are taking off. Do you think it's because there are a lot of people like my neighbor who have kind of been closeted or held back in some way? Or surely there's a better way than cutting arts money for elementary schools? And when now these portals are opening, and as you say, Hod, this evidence is, we can get us in the door in these kinds of ways. Do you see a kind of a groundswell of people saying, "Thank goodness, yes, let's do this"?
Yes, I think when people hear this idea, it's sort of like, oh, it's common sense, I mean, I of course, and it captures people's imaginations. People love the arts, even if they're beholders of the arts, they're not necessarily participating in it directly or teaching it, or they haven't had more of a direct encounter with it. There's still a kind of understanding that this is generally good for us, and as in that last conversation we had about what is it going to take for there to be a deeper investment, I think that some people are just not waiting around for that. They're just going to go out and get it and make it, and more power to them, and more power to us as we continue to mobilize this work.
I just want to add that once an authority, a institution or a ministry or a policymaker embraces arts and health or the arts therapies, people dare to go out of the closet because they feel that it's really, as you said, coming out with this and saying, yes, I'm also using mandalas to relax myself before, a stressful meeting. I'm also going to a playback theater ensemble in order to develop my playfulness. So I think that what Nisha is doing on the global scale is really, really important, because I know in my country, I'm really waiting for that report from the WHO, because some places, they need this reassurance that looking up for those who are, doing it. And let's just take everyone, try to take everyone with us if possible.
Get everyone out of the closet, so to speak.
And you know what? Yeah. And you know what? In indigenous societies, it is so clear that the arts are therapeutic, that the arts are part of the community, that the arts are already there. So it doesn't really have to do with being Western or non-Western or whatever. It really has to do with the culture, what we are appreciating in the culture. And I think we're getting there.
Well, I think we are too. And I think that one of the reasons why we're getting there is because of the work that the two of you are doing, which is helping us to get there faster, which we certainly need. We need to get there faster and better and for more people. So unfortunately, this brings us to the end of our time together today. But fortunately, we have been, our souls have been expanded, our minds have been informed in really powerful ways. And so I really want to thank again, Hod Orkibi and Nisha Sajnani for joining us today and giving us such thoughtful presentations and insightful discussion and answers to our questions. For those of you who are here, also feel free to add anything you'd like to in the chat as well by way of thanks. I would also like to thank Catherine Cotter, Associate Director of Research in the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project, and Sarah Sidoti, Associate Director of Operations, for all of their hard work behind the scenes to make these colloquia possible. And finally, thank you to each of you who are joining us today. It's been great to have you with us. Our next In Conversation Colloquium session will start at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, April 3, and we'll focus on museum visitor experience and well-being. So for more information on that event and other upcoming colloquium sessions, we invite you to sign up for our free newsletter, which you can do by visiting our website. Sarah has just popped that in the chat again for you, humanitiesandhumanflourishing.org. You can also find out much more information there about the work that the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project is doing. So please feel free to check it out, pass the word along to anyone you think might be interested. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, and be well.